high in the 9 heavens. Almost universal joy reigned. You see, it was that time, a little after, when Odin had come back in triumph after the great war of heaven, when the 9 worlds had almost torn asunder, when the giants, so great that they made the gods fear for their bodies, almost were beginning to move and stir. It was at that time that Odin had to go down into the world with his new brother, Loki, and through quests, through tasks, through great deeds, had slowly brought the world back to the orbit of the great gods, who were surely its master, who were once again its master, who once again reigned supreme. And so there was joy in the hearts of gods, and joy in the hearts of elves, and joy in the hearts of men. And folk said that this would be the new golden era. And those with eyes that could see, perhaps Odin, would notice that the Norns had leaven off, threading in the dark threads and the black into the skins of fate, and seemed to weave, for now, only gold, white and blue, the colours of glory and of joy. There was joy then in almost all of heaven. But only in that dark, shadowy corner where Loki was. Loki, the blood brother of Odin. Loki, the mortal man, who Odin had found, who had become, throughout their quests and throughout their trials, brothers together. For he now shared the holy blood of the gods. And although he still aged, it was slow, and he was, like them, immortal. While Odin had taken upon himself the guise of Loki's blood, the trickster, the deceiver. And in truth, Odin had not been able, for all his words now, to use the force of arms to reconquer the giants as they strained for their freedom, or to master again the trolls. Oh no, it was by trickery, lies and deceits that slowly they had broken the proud giant's back, that Surting had been betrayed, that Surt had been checkmated, that Thrym had been put in its place. Lies and deceit and cheating. And the memory of it, perhaps, lay upon Odin. For it was true, the minute he came into his glory, he came back to his second coming, to the new heaven and the new earth. He seemed to want to forget what he had done and tell different stories. Stories where Loki was there, but less significant than might have been. And so the gods used to look at Loki sidelong. After all, he was a mortal man who they must suffer as one of their own. And Odin, perhaps like many a man, would be seen to take his distance from those friends who had made him what he had become. For those friends who had known him in his youth, when all was struggle and strife, and now he had entered into his glory, seemed less welcome. Perhaps that was the reason. Or perhaps some kind of storyteller might tell you that the one eye of Odin, when it looked again at Loki and thought of his dead, saw the black skeins of fate that the tricks had caused to be weaved into the fates of gods. And when again he looked at Loki a second time, he saw only more black fate. And all the other gods took their cue from Odin. And so Loki was alone in heaven. It was Freya who said it. He doesn't want you here. Have you not heard? His wife Frigg is pregnant. There is going to be a second line of gods and a new covenant with the earth. These gods will be sinless. And Odin thinks he will enter into their sinlessness and will become anew. And you just remind him all that once was. And so it was. Loki tried to escape. He tried to escape Heaven's Ark. But the great gods had made the world a circle once again. And so go where he might amongst the 9 worlds, he trod a cycle and came always back to heaven. And more than that, he noticed that in all the worlds, Odin was always remembered with joy and glory, however he had tricked them, whatever lies he had told. It was Loki who took the blame. And so he fumed in heaven. And there came that dark day for him when Balder was born. Balder the bright, Balder the beautiful, Balder who could never tell a lie. And when he heard the praise, he knew that he would be quite forgotten. And so he slipped out of heaven, down, and went to the very north of Norway, where once Surtring had reigned, but now was laid utter waste. For the tricks of Loki and Odin lay heavy on this land. But he knew the great gods would not look for him there, if they cared to look at all. And wandering, he came at last to a great mountain, and he saw a cave that seemed to go right into the centre of the mountain. But it was very small, only a worm or a little lizard could get down it. And he knew the mountain for what it was. It was that mountain that Odin had come when he had stolen the Skeldic mead. And he sat thinking of their deeds together, and Loki started to cry. But just then, the strangest thing happened. For the mountain seemed to cry in return. A great, deep, sad voice that echoed all his own sadness. For a moment he thought it was the mountain, and then he realised it was coming up the hole, and it was a woman's voice, deep and powerful. And he realised there was a woman caught in the deeps of the mountain, and he knew who she might be, Surtring's bereft daughter, who Odin had betrayed. Now, Loki had a gift that not even the other great gods had. If he called and bellowed, he could cleave rocks asunder. And so he went up to the hole and whispered, "Stand clear." And then he let out such a bellow! The rocks tore apart, and where had been a narrow passage, there became a great and gaping void that led all the way down to a lava chamber, turning the mountain into a volcano. And Loki carefully climbed down the ravine that he had revealed. And there he saw, on the other side of the lava, there was a giantess. She seemed utterly beautiful, totally bereft, her eyes awash with tears. And he cried to her, "Don't cry, for we share the same grief." Just then, perhaps for the very first time, the sun came into the cavern, for it was just rising red. And Loki looked at the giant maid again, and her eyes were utterly dry, and her face, in that moment of sunlight, seemed to change. It was beautiful still, but it was hard, and the eyes seemed made of flint. And for the first time he realised her heart was made of diamond. And she smiled and said, "Welcome, I know who you are, Loki. You are the man who betrayed my father." And Loki made to flee, but she said, "Do not worry. I do not care for my father, but I care less for Odin. Let me give you now your desire. And Loki backed off, and he said, "Well, you're very beautiful and all that, but..." She smiled and said, "I did not mean that, although that might be the way of it. I meant your true desire. Do you not desire more to get your revenge on Odin than on anything else?" And when she said that, it was like the words crystallized in Loki's heart. He hated Odin. He hated him with a rage he did not know before. But now, like the lava, bubbled up inside him, and he said, "Yes, I would do anything." "Well, now, come here. You will see me but this morning and this night in my deepest cave, and when you wake, I will be gone. But take what I leave to heaven, and let fate do the rest." And she took Loki, then, whether he would or no, into the very darkest chamber, where the sun had not yet come. And when it was done, she left him asleep, and vanished into who knows what darkest chasm of hell, until the very end of time, whispering, "You will never see me again while Balder lives," before she departed, leaving then Loki to dream the sleep of Balder's death. And in that dream he saw himself a young man, without memory, without history once again, and it seemed to him he wore his memories like a locket about his neck. And as he watched, he saw a demon drive a great ship made from the fingers of dead men, fingers that seemed to still squirm with zombie power. And on that ship there were all the heroes fallen, all the warriors who Odin had rejected, all the basest, all the foulest of humanity, and demons awash. And the driver of that boat drove the boat up, breaking Bifrost, collapsing heaven into war, and before them there came a mighty wolf, and behind them a serpent. And Loki, seeing the serpent, awoke, and it seemed to him for just a moment poison was dripping on his face, and he screamed, and he was utterly alone in the deep recess, lit by the red of the lava beyond. Or at least he thought he was alone. But as he moved, he heard something crying, and he looked, and there was a child, a baby girl, but she seemed more dead than alive. And half her face was left in shadow, but she clutched in her right hand a lizard, and in her left, as if it were the youngest, a little wolf cub. And Loki took them up, and remembering what the giantess had told him, thought, "These must be what she left me." And as he thought that, he noticed that she had written up there on that small crack that perhaps she had flown into, her name: "I am now Agnar Balder. I will see you at the other end of time. Take then these my gifts to heaven." And Loki went out to the lava chamber, and there he paused. You see, he knew that for all he hated Odin, he didn't necessarily want to kill him, and that what the giantess had left him would not be good news for the gods. And so he paused, wondering if he might take these three and throw them into the lava while he could. Perhaps then the world would have a different fate, perhaps a brighter fate, perhaps he might have some sort of tryst with Odin, perhaps they might find a way to live together. Perhaps indeed, or perhaps he should take them to heaven and let ruin fall. But before he could decide, suddenly the sun rose, and it rose hard and huge, and out of the sun there stepped Balder. Balder, fully grown, and Balder smiled his glorious smile at Loki and said, I have found you. The Valfather wants you, for he has had such a dream that you hold in your hands the doom of gods, so he summons you to Valhalla." And before Loki could say anything, under the light of Balder, at the very speed of light, he found himself in hell. with the three still clutched in his hands. And when old one-eyed Odin saw the three, without saying anything, he got up and he ran. He hid under the bed in his own halls. And so Edward's Frigg said, his wife, I don't know what's got into him. But that child there, that sort of child is already dead. Look, I am a mother. I know a child that's not fit to live. And she called to one of her Valkyries, Bridget by name, and said, take that child and kill it. Now the Valkyrie are valiant warriors, brave beyond belief, but they are not child murderers. And Bridget took up the child, and it was wretched, and it seemed to fill her with utter revulsion. But she thought, I can't kill it in heaven. So she went back down to the mountain, thinking of the volcano from which it came. And she meant then to put the child on some crevasse that grew out of the volcano. You'll always find one. And it could stay on that ledge, and sooner or later it would tumble into the lava. And seeing such a crevice, she put the child on it, and did not notice the crack behind the ledge. And then she turned to ride back to heaven. Looking back one last time, the child seemed to be melting, its black face dissolving into the shadow, as if the shadow claimed it for its own. But she rode back to heaven. Meanwhile, Thor had taken the little lizard that had hooded eyes that no one had ever seen, and he said, this sleepy thing is barely alive. I'm just going to throw it in the ocean and drown it. And before anyone could stop him, he had taken it over the plank wall of heaven, and he tossed it into the ocean. Such a mighty tidal wave arose as it fell, that men wondered at it, and the tumult rose up to heaven. It was that the creature opened its eyes as it fell upon the water and stared. The stare of death, the stare of a dragon beyond dragons, straight in the eyes of Thor. And Thor hid as well. Now, the other gods were wondering what to do with the little dog, the wolf. It was a timber wolf. And as Tyr said, wolves are sacred to Odin. We cannot kill it. But none of them wanted to look after it. But Tyr, the god of law, knew his duty and said, well, I will do it. And he took then the wolf to his own halls, and he called it Fenris, Lord of Chaos. For it was true, the wolf, wherever the wolf was, chaos did seem to reign. But Tyr, the god of law, started to school it and to teach it, and it started to learn better manners. And he fed it lots, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew. It grew utterly, utterly immense, until the gods called upon Odin to look at it. And Odin looked at it in fear and said, that will not do, that dog has some doom upon it. We must at least chain it. So he took then the iron wood, but with which the planks of heaven are made, and forged from it using thunderbolt iron, the kind of steel the gods made in their for weapons. Such a steel so strong that nothing, no power, barely Thor himself could break it. And coming upon the dog, Fenris, when it was eating, he slipped the collar upon it, and then he and Thor held the hound down. But Fenris, barely flexing his muscles, pulled his neck. Laughing, the chain snapped. And he turned and looked at Odin with eyes of mistrust and licked his lips. But Tyr came and schooled him more, and he seemed even better behaved for a while. But Odin did not trust him. He took then the living hair of Thor's wife, whose hair was made from the sunbeams, and from sunbeams and from light, from the power of the light elf smiths, he forged a new chain, made, men said, from the very power of the sun, so that nothing under the sun could break it. And coming upon Fenris, when Fenris was sleeping, he slipped the chain on. And Fenris, feeling himself caught, strained and moved and strained and howled and strained and moved. And although the struggle was fierce, he had more power than the sun's own rays fist, and he broke it at the last. And he howled, and might have laid heaven waste there and then. But Tyre, his friend, calmed him down, and Odin slipped her away. He went then down, taking treasures that they would love, golden apples of the sun, the very water of that well that nurtures all the world, to be made into jewels perhaps and traded. He went down to see the dwarfs and their mightiest smiths, and the dwarfs agreed to help him for that price. And they took then the tail of bears, they took then the warmth of moonlight, they took then the honour of rulers, they took then the truth of traders, they took then the dreams of women, they took then man's right to roam where he will, they took then the redness of stars, so that none of those are left upon the world. And from these they forged such a chain that none had seen, or could barely see. Shifting shadow it was, barely there, but utterly resolute. That chain, they said Odin, that chain will last till the end of time. And Odin rubbed his one eye and wondered how long that would be. And then he went back to heaven. But Fenris refused to wear the chain. He refused. And it was Tyre who said, he will not wear that chain. You will not get near him unless I put my hand in his mouth. For he trusts me. I, the only god, would ever return him kindness. And Tyre put out his arm, and Fenris put the arm in his jaws. And then Tyre nodded, and before the dog could move, had fastened the chain around his neck, pulling it tight upon its straps. And then Fenris felt himself so fastened, and knew he could not break the bonds just yet. He bit down hard on the hand of the god of law, biting it clear off, devouring law in a great greedy gulp. And then Thor, straining with his strongest son Modi, took the great wolf and tied it to the far eastern mountains, to that root of the one tree that comes back up for light, tying it there, deep down against the mountains hard. But the howl of the wolf rang through the world like the very end of time. So Thor, going up to heaven, took one of the planks from the shield wall that guarded Asgard, and coming back down, put it in the wolf's mouth, and propping it up so that it could howl no more, and then went back to heaven in great joy. And there was joy once more in heaven, everywhere now, save old One Eye. And One Eye, who had missed Loki, and knew that he was gone, who knew that Loki, his blood brother, would now be in the shift and in the shadows, plotting his revenge. Loki gone, Odin went up to talk to Mimir, and from the high yew tree, Yggdrasil looked out, and deep in the chasms unlooked for, he saw a queen of hell, a queen of the dead had emerged, that child forsaken, and that queen was gathering all the demons and all the souls he could not have in Valhalla, and was forging from them an army. And then he looked in the ocean and saw only beyond the power of gods the growing immensity of the one serpent that circled the world 7 times already. And then he looked to the east, and his heart floundered, for he saw piece by slow piece by slow piece, the wolf was straining at its fetter, and that one day, at the end of time, even that fetter must break. Just then he jumped, for he heard a noise, a loud bang, as of a skein of fate being loaded onto the loom of the Norns. And for a moment he saw once again the black thread weave.